Situation. Yeah. I can't get it. Right. So first, like sort of like where my focus will be, is not yet classified as Tibeto Burman language, not yet. And it may belong either to the South Central branch or to the Tibeto branch. It hasn't properly been classified, but it's been said to belong to either of these. And there seem to be their primary reflex of several nations that I think would help us in classifying people. And that might situate it closer towards the South Central languages as opposed to so I'll first give a brief introduction, then I'll talk about Central versus Template. Then how Uipo fits into that, like with what we already know, and then I'm going to talk about standardization. Right, so this is my team that I work with in the Uipo speaking village, and who have contributed also with their advice to this talk to the audience. Right, so we're in Northeast India, and circled here in pink is Manipur. Northeast India is a linguistically very diverse area where a lot of Tibeto Burman languages are spoken, and there are three major political groups, which are Naga, Kutchin, and Meitei. But these Naga and Kutchin ethnic affiliations, they overlap, but they're not identical with linguistic branches. And with Naga language, they are linguistically related, they do not reconstruct very well. And then there are some Naga tribes, for example, Tangkul is Naga, but then some tribes that say of them they're Naga tribes, they speak what we would previously have called Kutchin, and we now refer to it as South Central to be politically more neutral, right? Because they're not Kutchin, they're ethnically Naga. Great. So the language I'm talking about is Uipo. It's spoken in Manipur. In the main village is Kangsi, the bottom one, and then this Koitu Center village, that's the so-called ancestral village, but now almost nobody lives there, and has a little bit less than 2,000 speakers. It's based on community headcount. The closest related language is Maring, which Uipo for a long time was sort of like clubbed together with, and the Maring were very hesitant, let's say, to let the Uipo separate and let them refer to themselves as Uipo and not Maring. And people are ethnically Naga. Right. Or so there was language with Maring, and a lot of officers do not actually classify Uipo at all. They just mention it together with Maring, and then they move on to then they move on to classifying race. So, for example, sources either say it's Maring is related to the Tangkul languages, or they say Maring acts like a bridge between Tangkul and Kutchin, right? So between Tangkul and South Central. And under Maring here we can understand Uipo's. Right. The Uipo community, just geographically, it's situated between Tangkul in the north and South Central in the south. So Tangkul here is this yellow area. Yeah. And then here we have South Central. And Uipo is spoken in here in this purple area, right? So it's geographically as well. This is like, it might seem a little bit cherry picked, but these are just the three sort of categories that I need to when I'm talking about Uipo. I think these are the most relevant things that I should talk about. So first of all, for South Central, we have very rich person indexing, which we don't have in Tangkul. Then South Central has stem intonation, which Tangkul doesn't have. For South Central, I think there are no distinctive lexical innovations known. For Tangkul, we have a few. So I think these 7 items can be seen as being Tangkul innovations. Right. Now, what about Uipo in terms of person indexing? It's like Tangkul, basically, there's no person indexing. Stem alternation, it has a few stems that do alternate, so could say it's closer to South Central. And then in terms of lexical innovations, not so sure. I'll talk about that a little bit more now because it's more complicated. So Uipo shares none of the Tangpool innovations, but does that now mean that Uipo is necessarily closer to South Central? I think not necessarily. There was a presentation, a conference presentation by Susie Kanshua and Karen Pakbanan, where they showed that what they called Merengue, where they substitute Uipo, that the lexicon would be closer to South Central. There's no paper yet, but just looking at the presentation, I'm not so sure that's true. So, because first of all, there are no innovations to my knowledge that are actually of language belonging to South Central. And then I just took a sample of 200 items of core vocabulary. And what I see is that, yeah, in some cases I can say synchronically the Uipo word is closer to what I see synchronically in Pidgin or what I see synchronically in Tangpool. But then this is almost always a retention. It's not an innovation, it's a retention. So it could be that Uipo was just extremely conservative and it kept the same retentions that Pidgin kept, or it kept some of the same that Tangpool kept. But there's no mutual innovation, so I think that with this we can't fail. So the question remains, I think, how close is Uipo to South Central or Tangpool perspective? Okay, so Uipo does show some stem alternations, but they do not look like South Central stem alternations. But there are semantically closely related pairs of items that look very much like South Central stem alternations. Right, so stem alternation is South Central. South Central is, I think, the only branch in this Northeast India that has them. And we have a nasal versus nasal velar coda alternation. It has for some, sorry, this should be SC. I forgot to change that. For some South Central languages. So, for example, Langkang by Miso, and also for Proto-South Central has also been shown. This coda alternation has been either associated with the historical nominalizer, but also with the historical positivizer. And the alternation is suggested to be the result of a historical T suffix. This is here called Benedict. It is Tibeto Burman positive. Microsoft calls it a nominalizer, but says it also comes in positive in other functions, as a verbalizer or corrective. And Chante in her grammar Miso calls it a valence changing morpheme and says probably positive for Miso. Right. In other sources, it's called a nominalizer, and its glottal stop is seen as a positive. So there's some debate about this, what it really is. Right, and in some languages, we can see that it works as a causative. So, for example, in biology. Right. Now, what about Uipo? So, in Uipo, a small subset of verbs do show stem alternation. It's only 5 that I've found so far. And it's always that a full vowel changes to a schwa. So it's not a coda change like in Pidgin. And I think that this always happens that a high falling tone becomes a high level tone on stem 2, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But there are no coda changes that are comparable to South Central. So South Central style stem alternation is basically an augmented stem 2. But Uipo stem alternation is stem 2, which is derived by vowel reduction. And then I have no attestation of stem 1 with this reduced structure. But there are some items that are reminiscent of South Central stem alternation with this nasal versus nasal velar coda. But they're not stem alternations, they're independent, but semantically very closely related items. So, for example, we have some go up and some bring up. Yon go down and yon bring down. Move to C and move to show. They are clearly independent lexical items because both items of these pairs can take this prefix curve, which is limited to step 1. That's the case for a lot of languages spoken in this Northeast India. Okay, so this is my full list of items, of these sort of items. And they look very much like, okay, they look very much like the stem alternations that we saw for some languages, right, where we have the velar nasal versus nasal coda. The relationship between them seems to always be a positive one. So go up and bring up is something like make something go up, right? And I think the nicest example is to see and to show, which is clearly a positive relation. And here, even the T is even there overtly, right? Okay. In Marine also there are some of these closely related pairs. I don't work on Marine actually. I got these through personal communication from a consultant. So I only have these 3 items. I'm not sure if they are on this. Right. But we see the same thing. Again, here, even in 2 examples, we have this T suffix, which previously was reconstructed to possibly be a causative, and indeed we do see a causative relation between these items. Okay. I think that these items may be a result of lexicalisation or stem alternation, which then would also be maybe like a step to say why Uipo is sort of like has lost a lot of morphology, because South Central has a lot of morphology, right? It's morphologically very rich, which Uipo really isn't, which makes you think that Uipo might be closer to Tangkul because Tangkul is the same, right? And a viable hypothesis might be that this T suffix is indeed a causative, and the causative meaning was preserved in the stage of lexicalisation. And it could either be preserved from the Tibeto Burman stage, or we could hypothesize that Uipo and also Marine evolved together with South Central. And this would then link Uipo more closely to the South Central languages. I think this is more likely because of this nasal versus nasal velar suffix coda that we saw, because that looks very, very much like South Central style stem alternation. Oh. Right, so ranks of stem alternation might link Uipo diachronically to South Central languages. At the same time, I think the data suggests a possible scenario for morphology loss, lexicalisation. This coming in weird order, there should something on top. And then influence, of Tangkul is still very likely. But what's also important, is that looking at the lexical data, I think it is not possible at the present stage of description and construction to link Uipo to either Tangkul or South Central. And the Uipo stem alternations also don't fit the South Central pattern. So I think these stem alternations at the moment are a very good argument if we want to sort of like place Uipo closer to either one of these branches, right? And I think I went through it very fast. Okay, so that's my literature. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to comments, questions.